Give yourself 90 days to change everything. Most people don't feel stuck because they are broken. They feel stuck because they are tired. Tired of starting over. Tired of trying to fix everything at once. Tired of being told they need more motivation, more discipline, more confidence. If you're listening to this, you probably already know what to do. You are not ignorant. You are not incapable. And you are not failing because you lack character. What you lack is not effort. It is structure. This matters more than it sounds. Most people blame themselves for outcomes that are actually produced by systems they never consciously built. They wake up inside routines they didn't design. They live inside environments that drain them. They react to days that were never shaped with intention. When things don't change, they internalize it. They call themselves lazy, undisciplined, inconsistent. That story is convenient. And it is wrong. The problem is not that you cannot change. The problem is that you keep trying to change your life without changing the framework your life runs on. This audiobook is not here to excite you. It is not here to motivate you for a week. It is not here to convince you that everything will magically fall into place if you just believe harder. This is a system. A quiet one. A deliberate one. Built for people who are done with noise. You do not need a new personality. You do not need a dramatic breakthrough. You do not need to become someone else overnight. You need a window of time that is long enough to matter, and short enough to commit to. That window is 90 days. Not forever. Not the rest of your life. Just 90 days. 3 months is long enough for habits to stabilize. Long enough for emotional resistance to surface and soften. Long enough for identity to begin shifting from effort to default. And it is short enough that your nervous system does not panic. You are not being asked to promise anything beyond that. Most people fail at change because they frame it as permanent from the beginning. They think in terms of, I have to be this person now. I can never go back. I have to fix everything. That kind of thinking creates pressure. Pressure creates resistance. Resistance creates avoidance. This audiobook removes that pressure. You are not deciding who you will be forever. You are deciding who you will practice being for the next 90 days. Practice is different from performance. Practice allows mistakes. Practice allows adjustment. Practice allows learning. This is a reset, not a test. There is another quiet truth that rarely gets said. Most people don't fail because they quit early. They fail because they keep restarting. They burn emotional energy on new beginnings instead of building continuity. They mistake intensity for progress. They confuse urgency with importance. This audiobook rejects that model. Change does not come from doing more. It comes from doing less, consistently. From removing friction. From reducing decisions. From narrowing focus until your energy finally has somewhere to go. Over the next 90 days, the goal is not to transform your entire life. The goal is to become structurally different. To think differently about time. To move through your days with intention. To respond to discomfort without avoidance. To build trust with yourself through repetition, not promises. This system rests on a few pillars. Clarity. Structure. Focus. Emotional regulation. Identity built through repetition. Not complexity. Because complexity is the enemy of consistency. Each chapter builds deliberately. Nothing here is random. Nothing is designed for excitement. You will stabilize your time and attention. You will shape your days. You will strengthen internal discipline. You will face avoidance without drama. And you will solidify an identity that does not quit easily. This is not fast. But it is reliable. And reliability is what creates trust. There is one more thing you need to hear. You are not behind. This system does not care about your past. It only responds to what you repeat starting now. You do not have to feel ready. You only have to stay. That is the agreement. Not intensity. Not perfection. Presence. Showing up even when it feels quiet. Especially when it feels quiet. Because this is where most people quit. Not when things are hard. But when things become boring. When progress is internal and invisible. This audiobook is designed for that phase. You will not be asked to chase motivation. You will be asked to simplify, to repeat, to remain. And over time, something subtle happens. Your mind stops resisting. Your days stop feeling chaotic. Your actions stop feeling forced. Not because life became easier, but because you became steadier. By the end of these 90 days, the change will not feel dramatic. It will feel earned. You will notice it in how you wake up, in how you speak to yourself, in how you no longer negotiate with habits you once avoided. This is not a promise of perfection. It is a promise of difference. When you are ready, we begin with the agreement itself. Not a public declaration. Not a dramatic vow. Just a private decision. Chapter 1. The 90-Day Agreement. Most people approach change as a demand. They demand results from themselves. They demand consistency. They demand certainty. And when those demands are not met, they respond with disappointment, pressure, or withdrawal. This is where change breaks down. Not because the person is unwilling, but because the relationship with themselves has become adversarial. The first thing we are doing here is changing that relationship. This chapter is not about goals. It is not about ambition. It is not about proving anything. It is about making an agreement. A private one. An agreement that removes pressure instead of increasing it. An agreement that creates safety instead of fear. An agreement that gives your nervous system room to stay engaged instead of shutting down. This matters more than it sounds. Most people quit because their expectations are too large for their capacity in the moment. They think in absolutes. They think in permanent terms. I have to fix my life. I need to become disciplined. I can't go back. That kind of language creates internal resistance immediately. Your mind hears permanence and responds with avoidance. Your body hears pressure and responds with fatigue. This is not a character flaw. It is a protective mechanism. So, we are not asking for forever. We are asking for 90 days. Nothing more. 90 days is not symbolic. It is functional. It is long enough for habits to move from conscious effort to background behavior. It is long enough for emotional resistance to appear, peak, and soften. It is long enough for trust to be rebuilt through repetition. And it is short enough that you do not feel trapped. You are not being asked to become a different person for the rest of your life. You are being asked to practice a different way of living for the next 90 days. That distinction changes everything. Practice does not require certainty. Practice does not require confidence. Practice does not require motivation. It requires participation. This is where most people misunderstand commitment. They think commitment means intensity. They think it means sacrifice. They think it means forcing themselves to feel a certain way. Real commitment is quieter than that. Real commitment is a boundary. A decision that limits options. For the next 90 days, certain behaviors are simply not up for negotiation. Not because they are dramatic, but because they are foundational. You are not promising results. You are promising consistency. You are not promising to feel good. You are promising to stay present. You are not promising to succeed. You are promising not to abandon yourself mid-process. That is the agreement. And it must remain private. This is important. Public declarations feel motivating in the moment, but they add pressure. Pressure introduces performance. Performance introduces fear of failure. This work does not benefit from an audience. Change stabilizes faster when it is not being watched. When you keep this agreement to yourself, something subtle happens. You stop performing. You stop explaining. You stop managing perception. Your energy stays where it belongs. On the work. Another reason this agreement works is because it rejects forever thinking completely. Forever is overwhelming. Forever invites comparison. Forever creates the illusion that you must have everything figured out immediately. 90 days does not do that. 90 days asks one question only. Can you show up today? Not perfectly. Not heroically. Just deliberately. Most people underestimate how powerful this is. When you remove the pressure of permanence, consistency becomes possible. When consistency becomes possible, identity begins to shift. This is not dramatic. It is deliberate. There will be days inside this agreement where nothing feels different. There will be days where boredom shows up. There will be days where doubt appears quietly in the background. That does not mean the agreement is failing. It means it is working. Resistance is information. It shows you where the old patterns are losing their grip. This is where most people quit. Not because things are hard, but because things stop being exciting. They mistake the absence of emotional reward for lack of progress. This system does not rely on excitement. It relies on repetition. The agreement protects repetition. There is also something else happening here. By choosing 90 days, you are creating a container. A defined beginning. A defined middle. A defined end. Your mind needs containers. Without them, effort feels endless and draining. Inside a container, effort feels purposeful. You know when you are starting. You know when you are finishing. And paradoxically, that makes it easier to stay. This agreement is not rigid. It is firm. Rigid systems break under stress. Firm systems hold shape while allowing adjustment. You are allowed to adapt inside these 90 days. You are allowed to refine. You are allowed to learn. What you are not allowed to do is disappear. No dramatic quitting. No silent withdrawal. No, I'll start again next week. You stay. Even when it feels quiet. Especially when it feels quiet. Because this is where trust is built. Not through intensity, but through presence. Every day you honor the agreement, even imperfectly, you send yourself a signal. I do what I say I will do. I don't abandon processes halfway. I stay. That signal compounds. Over time, you stop relying on motivation. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop needing emotional readiness. You begin to act from identity. Not the identity you want. The identity you are practicing. This chapter is not asking you to write anything down. It is not asking you to visualize. It is not asking you to announce anything. It is asking you to decide. Quietly. 90 days. No promises beyond that. No pressure to be exceptional. Just consistency. Just structure. Just presence. This agreement is the foundation everything else will rest on. Without it, the system collapses. With it, the system holds. Nothing else in this audiobook will ask more of you than this. And nothing else will give you more in return. When you are ready, we will move into the next phase. Not action yet. Not habits yet. First, we clear the noise. That is where real change begins. Chapter 2. Clearing the mental noise. Most people try to change their lives while their minds are still crowded. Crowded with unfinished thoughts. Crowded with constant input. Crowded with emotional residue from conversations, mistakes, expectations, and pressure. They attempt to add structure on top of noise. They add goals to confusion. They add habits to mental clutter. And then they wonder why nothing sticks. This is not because they are incapable of focus. It is because focus cannot exist in a crowded space. Before anything new can be built, something has to be cleared. Mental noise is not always loud. Often, it is subtle. It shows up as constant internal commentary, as a low-level sense of urgency, as the feeling that you should be doing something else, even when you are already doing something. It shows up as restlessness without direction. This matters more than it sounds. When the mind is noisy, action becomes reactive. You move, but not intentionally. You do things, but without coherence. Progress requires clarity. Clarity requires silence. Not permanent silence. Not empty silence. Usable silence. The kind of mental space where a single thought can be held without interruption. Most people think they lack discipline. What they lack is mental margin. Their attention is fragmented before the day even begins. Notifications, conversations, content, and unresolved emotions all compete for space. By the time they sit down to focus, their energy is already diluted. This chapter is not about productivity. It is about subtraction. You do not need more input. You need fewer open loops. Emotional residue is one of the most overlooked sources of mental noise. It is the feeling left behind after interactions you did not process, after decisions you avoided, after expectations you absorbed without choosing. Residue does not announce itself. It accumulates quietly. And over time, it creates weight. This is why even simple tasks can feel heavy. Not because the task is difficult, but because it is being carried on top of unresolved mental load. Clarity must come before action because action without clarity creates more noise. You do something. You second-guess it. You switch directions. You start over. Each restart adds friction. This system does not begin with doing. It begins with clearing. Clearing does not mean escaping your responsibilities. It means reducing internal interference. For the next 90 days, you are not trying to be everywhere. You are not trying to consume everything. You are not trying to keep up. You are choosing mental quiet. This is where most people resist. Silence feels uncomfortable when you are used to stimulation. Clarity feels threatening when you are used to distraction. Noise creates the illusion of movement. Silence reveals what actually matters. That can feel confronting. This is not a sign you are doing it wrong. It is a sign you are finally listening. The core principle here is simple. Nothing new is added until the mind is quieter. Not everything needs to be resolved. But everything does need to stop competing for attention. Practically, this means narrowing your mental field. You stop multitasking. You stop half-starting things. You stop carrying problems you cannot act on today. Each day has fewer cognitive commitments. When your mind drifts, you gently bring it back. Not forcefully. Not aggressively. Firmly. Mental silence is not achieved through effort. It is achieved through boundaries. Boundaries around input. Boundaries around attention. Boundaries around what gets your emotional energy. You begin to notice how often your mind wants to escape. How often it looks for stimulation. How often it avoids stillness. This awareness is not a problem. It is the work. This is where most people quit. Not because clearing is hard, but because it feels unproductive. There is no visible output. No immediate reward. Just space. And yet, this space is what allows everything else to work. Without it, structure feels oppressive. With it, structure feels supportive. You may notice boredom here. You may notice restlessness. You may notice an urge to fill the silence. That urge is not failure. It is the residue surfacing. Stay with it. You are not trying to eliminate thoughts. You are learning not to chase them. Each time you choose not to engage with unnecessary input, you reclaim a small amount of authority over your attention. That authority compounds. Over time, your thinking becomes slower, but clearer. Your decisions become fewer, but firmer. Your actions become simpler, but more effective. This chapter is not asking you to isolate yourself. It is asking you to be selective. To recognize that not everything deserves your attention. To accept that clarity is a prerequisite, not a reward. You are not behind because you have not done enough. You are overloaded because you have done too much without pause. Clearing mental noise is not a retreat. It is preparation. Nothing else in this system will work without this step. And once it begins to settle, you will feel it. Not as excitement, but as relief. A quiet sense that you are no longer being pulled in 10 directions at once. That is the foundation. When the mind is quieter, patterns become visible. And that is what we will look at next. Because once the noise is gone, what remains is the cycle. And it cannot be ignored anymore. Chapter 3: Ending the Old Cycle. Most cycles don't feel dramatic while you're inside them. They feel familiar, predictable, almost invisible. You wake up, move through your day, respond to the same pressures, return to the same habits, and tell yourself you'll adjust later. Not today. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe next week. Over time, that repetition begins to feel like personality. This is just how I am. I always lose momentum. I can't seem to stay consistent. But patterns are not identity. They are repetition without interruption. This is where many people misunderstand what's keeping them stuck. They assume the issue is effort, or discipline, or desire. So they apply willpower. They push harder. They force compliance. They rely on emotional intensity to override friction. And for a short time, it works. Then the environment reasserts itself. The same triggers, the same defaults, the same cues, and the cycle resumes. This matters more than it sounds. Willpower is not designed to fight systems. It is designed to make occasional decisions. When you rely on willpower alone, you are asking a limited resource to compete with an environment that runs 24 hours a day. That is not a fair contest. You are not failing because you lack discipline. You are failing because your surroundings keep reinforcing the old version of you. Patterns repeat because they are supported. They are supported by what you see first thing in the morning, by what you reach for when you're tired, by what fills the empty moments of your day, and most importantly, by what you do not change because it feels uncomfortable or inconvenient. This chapter is about interruption, not dramatic change, not reinvention. Interruption. Ending a cycle does not require you to know what comes next. It requires you to stop feeding what already exists. This is where most people resist. Because the old cycle, even if it's unproductive, is familiar. It provides predictability. It reduces uncertainty. Ending it means sitting with discomfort. And discomfort is often mistaken for danger. So the mind offers compromises. Just this once. I'll start tomorrow. I've had a long day. These are not failures of character. They are protective reflexes. The mind prefers known discomfort to unknown effort. Understanding this removes shame. You are not weak for repeating patterns. You are human. But awareness creates responsibility. Once you see the cycle, continuing it becomes a choice. This is the shift. The old cycle usually has 3 components: a cue, a response, a payoff. The cue is subtle: fatigue, boredom, emotional discomfort. The response is automatic: distraction, avoidance, overconsumption. The payoff is temporary relief. Not satisfaction. Not progress. Relief. And relief is enough to keep the loop alive. This is why motivation alone never works. Motivation targets outcomes. Cycles are sustained by relief. To end the cycle, you do not attack the outcome. You disrupt the relief. This is not dramatic. It is deliberate. You stop making it easy for the old version of you to survive. That does not mean punishment. It means friction. Small, intentional friction. If the old cycle is fueled by constant stimulation, you reduce access. If it is fueled by late nights, you adjust your evenings. If it is fueled by avoidance, you narrow the decision window. Not everything. Just one pressure point. Most people try to change behavior without changing access. They say they want focus, but keep distraction within reach. They want discipline, but keep comfort readily available. This creates internal conflict. You end the conflict by changing the environment, not arguing with yourself. This is where identity begins to shift. Not because you declare it, but because the old behaviors no longer fit easily. Ending the old cycle does not mean you never feel tempted. It means temptation has fewer places to land. There will be resistance here. Not loud resistance. Quiet resistance. A sense of restlessness. An urge to fill space. A subtle discomfort with silence. This is normal. The old cycle filled something. Even if it was unhealthy. When it's removed, you feel the absence. Most people misinterpret this absence as failure. It's not working. I feel worse. I'm more uncomfortable. This is where most people quit. But discomfort here is not regression. It is exposure. You are experiencing the space that was previously numbed or avoided. This space is not a problem. It is the beginning of clarity. And clarity is necessary before rebuilding. There is another layer to ending the old cycle. You must stop identifying with it. Not with force. With distance. Instead of saying, "I always do this," you learn to observe. This is the pattern trying to resume. This is the familiar response showing up. This is the moment where I usually disengage. Observation weakens identification. You are no longer inside the pattern. You are watching it. That separation matters. Because you cannot change what you believe is you. But you can change what you see as behavior. Ending the old cycle does not require perfection. It requires consistency. You will interrupt it once, then again, then miss it, then interrupt it again. This is not failure. This is practice. Each interruption weakens the loop. Each pause creates space for a different response. Over time, the old cycle loses momentum. Not because you fought it, but because you stopped feeding it. This chapter is not asking you to replace the cycle yet. That comes later. Right now, the work is subtraction. Removing what drains. Reducing what reinforces the old identity. Allowing discomfort without immediately escaping it. This is not dramatic. It is deliberate. And it is one of the most important shifts in the entire 90-day process. Because until the old cycle ends, the new one has nowhere to land. Ending a cycle is not an event. It is a series of quiet refusals. Refusals to default. Refusals to self-soothe in ways that cost you later. Refusals to confuse relief with progress. Each refusal strengthens self-respect. Not the loud kind. The steady kind. You begin to trust yourself not because life gets easier, but because you stop lying to yourself about what keeps you stuck. That trust will matter later. For now, all you need to do is notice, interrupt, and stay. The cycle ends when you stop giving it energy. And once it ends, space opens. That space is where clarity begins. When you're ready, we will move into redefining identity. Not by force, by repetition. Chapter 4: Redefining Your Identity. Most attempts at change fail before they even begin. Not because the effort is insufficient. Not because you are incapable. Not because you lack desire. They fail because identity remains unchanged. You may try harder. You may read more books. You may follow more advice. You may impose stricter routines. And yet, something inside you resists. The old patterns persist. The familiar self reasserts itself quietly, almost without notice. This is where the real work lies, not in action, but in who you believe yourself to be. Change that is disconnected from identity is temporary. It may last a day, a week, or even a month. But eventually, when resistance surfaces, when motivation fades, when the nervous system seeks comfort, the old self quietly returns. This is not failure. It is a signal. A signal that transformation requires a deeper foundation. The person you are becoming must be embedded in your sense of self. Most people think change begins with doing. They think, if I act disciplined, I will become disciplined. If I force myself to work, I will become productive. If I speak with confidence, I will become confident. This is partially true, but incomplete. Effort alone cannot shift identity. Trying without alignment often strengthens the old self by creating friction. You become someone who resists themselves. Someone caught between intention and self-trust. The shift that matters is from trying to becoming. Trying is external. Becoming is internal. Trying is conditional. Becoming is habitual. Trying is temporary. Becoming is identity. Becoming is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not need recognition. It exists in the repetition of aligned behavior, day after day, until it feels normal. This is where most people stumble. They attempt transformation without defining who they are practicing to become. They chase behaviors without embedding them in identity. They fixate on outcomes instead of self-definition. Redefining identity begins with choice. A simple, deliberate choice to define yourself by your actions rather than your intentions. To define yourself by what you practice consistently, not by what you hope will happen. To claim responsibility for the version of yourself that is emerging, even in small, quiet ways. You do not have to change everything at once. You do not need to adopt a dramatic persona. You do not need to become someone unrecognizable. You need to become someone recognizable to yourself. Someone whose actions, even small ones, align with the life you are choosing. Identity is reinforced through repetition. Every day you honor the small decisions that reflect the person you are practicing to become, you build trust with yourself. Every time you respond in alignment instead of reaction, the new identity strengthens. Every moment you act according to principle, rather than impulse, you signal to yourself who you are, and who you are not. This process requires patience. It requires quiet attention. It requires a willingness to notice when the old self surfaces, and to act anyway. The power of quiet self-definition is that it removes reliance on motivation. It removes the constant negotiation with your desires. It removes the need for dramatic effort. When identity shifts, behavior flows. You no longer try to act. You act because that is who you have decided to be. For example, instead of forcing yourself to exercise out of obligation, you begin to define yourself as someone who moves daily. Instead of struggling to eat better, you become someone who chooses nourishment. Instead of attempting to concentrate, you become someone who focuses naturally, because focus has become a part of your internal story. Notice that none of this requires perfection. It requires continuity. It requires presence. It requires showing up, even when the old self whispers doubt. Even when the reward is invisible. Even when no one is watching. This is where transformation stabilizes. Not in extraordinary effort. Not in grand declarations. Not in visible results. But in the quiet alignment between your choices and the person you are becoming. You may feel tension during this process. Old habits, old narratives, old self-concepts will push back. You may feel uncertainty, discomfort, even frustration. This is not resistance to you personally. It is resistance to change that has integrity. It is the friction between what was familiar and what is necessary. This tension is valuable. It signals growth. It signals that the nervous system is being asked to update itself. It signals that transformation is happening beneath the surface. By the end of 90 days, if you practice consistently, the old self will not disappear completely. You will carry remnants of it. But those remnants will no longer dictate your actions. They will exist as background noise, rather than controlling force. Redefining identity is the foundation for every other change in this process. Without it, habits are fragile, routines are temporary, and vision becomes fiction. With it, every small action compounds. Every choice reinforces the emerging self. Every day becomes evidence of growth. The quiet shift from trying to becoming is deliberate, subtle, and firm. It requires no spectacle, no applause, no external verification. It requires only presence, repetition, and trust in the practice itself. When you define yourself deliberately, you stop negotiating with yourself. You stop overthinking effort. You stop waiting for motivation or clarity. You move naturally, because movement is now part of who you are. This is the most overlooked aspect of change. It is not the hardest, but it is the most essential. Because identity is the lens through which all behavior flows. Change the lens, and everything else follows. Quietly, without dramatic effort, you become someone who acts differently. Someone who responds differently. Someone who thinks differently. Someone who no longer needs to try, because becoming is no longer optional, it is habitual. By the end of this chapter, consider this the first layer of transformation, not the person you hope to be. Not the person others expect you to be. But the person you practice becoming in silence, day after day, until it feels natural. This is the power of quiet self-definition. And this is the foundation on which the next chapters will build. Chapter 5. Designing Your 90-Day Vision. Most people approach vision the same way they approach escape. They imagine a future that feels far removed from their current life. More successful. More confident. More impressive. The vision becomes a fantasy. And fantasy creates distance. When the future feels too different from the present, the mind quietly disengages. It treats the vision as entertainment, not instruction. Something to think about, not something to live into. This is where vision fails. Not because imagining is useless, but because imagining without structure creates overwhelm. You do not need a bigger dream. You need a grounded one. A vision that feels close enough to touch. A vision that fits inside 90 days. A vision that respects your current capacity instead of denying it. This chapter is not about what you want to achieve. It is about how you want to live. That distinction matters more than it sounds. Achievement-focused visions create pressure. They fixate on outcomes that are partially outside your control. They invite comparison. They trigger impatience. Lifestyle-focused visions do the opposite. They anchor you in behaviors. They give you something you can practice daily. They make progress tangible, even when results are delayed. This is not dramatic. It is deliberate. Most people say they want to be disciplined, focused, calm, or consistent. But they never define what that looks like on an ordinary day. So the vision stays vague. And vague visions cannot guide behavior. For the next 90 days, your vision must answer a simpler question. How does a normal day look when I am living correctly? Not perfectly. Correctly. How do you wake up? How do you move through the morning? How do you work? How do you rest? How do you speak to yourself when things do not go as planned? This is the level of vision that creates change. You are not designing a new life. You are designing a repeatable day. This is where most people overcomplicate things. They try to improve everything at once. Health, career, relationships, mindset, finances. The vision becomes heavy before it even begins. Overwhelm is not a sign that you lack discipline. It is a sign that your vision is too broad. Simplicity is not laziness. It is precision. A 90-day vision should feel almost underwhelming at first. Manageable, focused, clear. If it excites you too much, it is probably unrealistic. If it intimidates you, it is definitely unsustainable. The right vision creates calm. Because calm allows consistency. This chapter is about narrowing. Not shrinking your potential, but refining your attention. You do not need to decide who you will be in 5 years. You need to decide how you will show up this season. This is where most people quit mentally. They think small visions mean small lives. They confuse simplicity with limitation. In reality, simplicity is what allows momentum to build. Momentum does not come from ambition. It comes from repetition without resistance. Your 90-day vision should prioritize 3 things only. How you use your time. How you manage your energy. How you treat yourself internally. Everything else is secondary. This is not a productivity exercise. It is an alignment exercise. You are aligning your days with the kind of person you are becoming. For example, instead of saying, I want to be successful, the vision becomes, I wake up at the same time each day. I start my mornings without chaos. I work on one important thing without distraction. Instead of I want confidence, it becomes, I speak to myself calmly. I follow through on small commitments. I stop negotiating with avoidance. Instead of I want balance, it becomes, I end my day deliberately. I rest without guilt. I don't use exhaustion as proof of worth. Notice the difference. These are not fantasies. They are behaviors. And behaviors are trainable. This is also where you begin shifting from achievement identity to lifestyle identity. Achievement identity says, I will be someone when I reach something. Lifestyle identity says, I am someone because of how I live. The first keeps you waiting. The second keeps you practicing. Your 90-day vision should be written in the language of presence. Not I will. But I am practicing. Not one day. But each day. This keeps the mind engaged instead of postponing change. There will be resistance here. A quiet voice that says this is too simple to matter. That you should be doing more. That you are capable of more. That voice is familiar. It is the same voice that has pushed you into cycles of overcommitment and burnout. You do not need to silence it. You just do not need to obey it. This is not the season for intensity. It is the season for stability. Stability creates trust. Trust creates capacity. Capacity allows expansion later. This vision is not permanent. It is provisional. It exists only for 90 days. That makes it safe. You are not locking yourself into anything. You are experimenting with a way of living that supports you instead of draining you. That is the reframe. This is not pressure. It is a trial period. Another reason this vision works is because it removes comparison. You are not measuring yourself against others. You are measuring yourself against yesterday's behavior. Did you live according to the structure you defined? Did you show up in the way you said you would? That is the only metric. And it is available to you every day. There will be days where you miss parts of the vision. That does not invalidate it. Consistency is not perfection. It is return. returning to the structure, returning to the intention, returning without self-punishment. This chapter is not asking you to visualize success. It is asking you to visualize normalcy. A normal day lived well. Repeated. That is how lives change quietly. When the vision is grounded, action becomes lighter. When action is lighter, resistance weakens. When resistance weakens, identity stabilizes. By the end of these 90 days, you will not feel like a different person in theory. You will feel different in practice. Because you will be living differently. Not impressively. Not dramatically. Deliberately. This is the vision you are designing. Not a fantasy to chase. A structure to live inside. In the next chapter, we will move from vision into execution. Not through motivation, but through daily structure. Because vision without structure is imagination. And structure is where change becomes real. Chapter 6. Daily Structure Over Motivation. Most people believe they fail because they are not motivated enough. They wait to feel ready. They wait to feel focused. They wait for the internal signal that says, now. That signal is unreliable. Motivation is inconsistent by design. It rises and falls with mood, sleep, stress, and external feedback. Basing your life on it means your progress will always be fragile. This is not a personal flaw. It is a predictable outcome. If your days require motivation to function, you will eventually stop functioning. This is where structure becomes essential. Structure is not about control. It is about conservation. It preserves energy. It removes friction. It reduces the number of times you have to convince yourself to act. Most people think discipline is an internal trait. Something you either have or don't. In reality, discipline is often external. It is built into how your day is shaped. When your environment and schedule are aligned, discipline feels natural. When they are not, discipline feels exhausting. This is why routines outperform inspiration every time. Inspiration asks you to feel something before you act. Routine asks you to act regardless of how you feel. Routine does not argue with you. It does not negotiate. It simply moves you forward. This matters more than it sounds. Every day, you make hundreds of small decisions. What to focus on. What to avoid. When to start. When to stop. Each decision costs energy. When too many decisions are left open, your energy drains before anything meaningful happens. This is decision fatigue. And when decision fatigue sets in, even simple tasks feel heavy. People often misinterpret this as laziness. It is not. It is overload. Structure solves this quietly. When your day is pre-decided in key areas, your mind relaxes. It no longer has to fight itself constantly. You are not deciding whether to act. You are deciding how well to stay present while acting. This is a fundamental shift. The goal of structure is not to make you productive all day. It is to ensure that the important things happen even on average days. Especially on average days. Most people build systems for their best days. Then they are surprised when those systems collapse under normal conditions. This system is built for ordinary energy levels. For days when you don't feel inspired. For days when nothing feels urgent. Those are the days that shape identity. A structured day does not need to be full. It needs to be intentional. There are only a few non-negotiables. A defined start to your day. A protected block for focused effort. A clear stopping point. Everything else is secondary. When these anchors exist, the day holds shape. When they don't, time dissolves. You are not trying to optimize every hour. You are trying to prevent drift. Drift is subtle. It looks like scrolling longer than intended. Postponing small tasks. Starting without finishing. Over time, drift erodes self-trust. Structure corrects that. Not forcefully. Consistently. This is where most people resist. They hear routine and think of rigidity. They imagine strict schedules and constant pressure. That is not what this is. This structure is minimal. It is designed to support discipline naturally, not demand it. You are not filling your day with tasks. You are removing ambiguity. When ambiguity is removed, action becomes simpler. There is also something emotionally stabilizing about structure. When your day follows a familiar rhythm, your nervous system feels safer. Safety increases focus. Focus increases follow-through. This is why chaos drains you more than effort. A disorganized day requires constant recalibration. A structured day allows momentum. You begin to trust that certain things will happen without constant monitoring. That trust frees attention. And attention is the real currency here. Another quiet benefit of structure is that it changes how you relate to motivation. You stop chasing it. You stop waiting for it. You stop interpreting its absence as a problem. Motivation becomes a bonus, not a requirement. Some days it shows up. Most days it doesn't. Either way, the work still happens. This is how identity shifts. You begin to see yourself as someone who acts without needing to feel a certain way first. That is not dramatic. It is stabilizing. There will be resistance to this. Boredom will appear. Restlessness will surface. Your mind may try to convince you that you need variety, that you are limiting yourself, that this is too simple to matter. That is the old pattern speaking. The old pattern thrives on novelty and intensity. It avoids repetition because repetition reveals inconsistency. Structure removes hiding places. It shows you where your energy actually goes. This can feel uncomfortable at first. You may notice how often you try to escape focus. How quickly you look for stimulation. How unfamiliar sustained attention feels. This is not failure. This is awareness. And awareness is progress. You are not meant to feel excited about structure. You are meant to feel supported by it. Over time, something shifts. Your days stop feeling chaotic. Your mind stops racing ahead constantly. You begin to trust that what matters will get done. Not perfectly. Reliably. That reliability builds self-respect. Not confidence. Self-respect. Confidence fluctuates. Self-respect accumulates. It grows every time you honor the structure, even when you don't feel like it. Especially when you don't feel like it. This chapter is not asking you to redesign your entire life overnight. It is asking you to stop outsourcing your progress to motivation. Motivation is optional. Structure is not. As the days continue, this will become clearer. You will notice that effort feels lighter. That resistance passes faster. That starting no longer feels like a battle. Not because you became more disciplined internally, but because your days stopped working against you. This is how change becomes sustainable. Quietly. Deliberately. Without forcing. As we move forward, the structure of your days will support the deeper internal work to come. You are not preparing for intensity. You are preparing for consistency. And consistency, over 90 days, changes everything. Chapter 7. Mastering the First 30 Days, Stabilization Phase. The first 30 days are not for transformation. This is where many people misunderstand the process. They enter the beginning expecting visible results. They look for motivation. They look for momentum. They look for proof that this is working. And when those things don't appear quickly, doubt creeps in. This chapter exists to correct that misunderstanding. The first 30 days are not designed to change your life. They are designed to stabilize you inside the system. That distinction matters. Stabilization comes before growth. Always. If a structure is unstable, adding more weight collapses it. If a routine is unstable, adding ambition breaks it. If a person is unstable, adding pressure causes withdrawal. The first 30 days are about removing volatility. Your emotions will still fluctuate. Your motivation will still rise and fall. Your confidence will still feel inconsistent. That is not the problem. The problem, historically, has been that your behavior fluctuates with those internal states. In this phase, we break that link. The goal of the first 30 days is simple: to show up the same way regardless of how you feel. Not perfectly. Not enthusiastically. Just consistently. This is where most people quit. Not because things are hard, but because things feel underwhelming. The beginning often feels quieter than expected. There is less drama, less excitement, less emotional payoff. That quietness can feel unsettling. Your mind is used to stimulation. Your nervous system is used to urgency. Chaos, even when uncomfortable, feels familiar. Stability does not. So when the noise dies down, your system looks for something to react to. It may create boredom. It may create doubt. It may start questioning the process. Is this enough? Shouldn't I be doing more? Why don't I feel different yet? This is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that you are no longer feeding the old cycle. The first 30 days are for breaking emotional dependence on intensity. You are not here to feel inspired. You are here to feel steady. Steadiness is unfamiliar to people who have lived in cycles of urgency and collapse. So, resistance appears. Resistance is not always loud. Often, it is subtle. It shows up as boredom, as restlessness, as the urge to add more, to complicate things, to look for faster results. This matters more than it sounds. Most people don't quit because the system is hard. They quit because the system feels plain. They confuse simplicity with inefficiency. They think change must feel dramatic to be real. It doesn't. Real change often feels uneventful in the beginning. This phase asks you to tolerate that. To stay when there is no emotional reward. To remain when there is no applause. To continue when nothing is happening. Because something is happening. Your nervous system is learning safety in consistency. Your mind is learning that effort does not require urgency. Your identity is learning that you can be relied on. That learning does not announce itself. It happens quietly. Self-doubt will appear in this phase. Not aggressive self-doubt. Subtle self-doubt. Questions that sound reasonable. Is this really going to change anything? Other people seem to do more. Maybe I should adjust the plan. Be careful here. Self-doubt often disguises itself as logic. But underneath it is discomfort with stillness. The old version of you survived by reacting. By responding to pressure. By waiting for emotional cues. This version of you is learning to act without stimulation. That feels strange at first. So the mind looks for exits. This is where staying becomes the work. Not pushing harder. Not adding more habits. Not seeking reassurance. Staying. Showing up even when the day feels flat. Repeating the same structure even when it feels boring. Allowing the system to do its job without interference. This phase is not about proving discipline. It is about removing drama from discipline. Drama exhausts people. Structure sustains them. You may notice that your days feel slower. More predictable. Less emotionally charged. That is not stagnation. That is stabilization. Think of this phase as setting the baseline. Before change can occur, your system needs to know what normal feels like. Not crisis. Not urgency. Not burnout. Normal. Once normal is established, improvement becomes possible. Without this phase, improvement never lasts. Another reason people quit in the first 30 days is because they expect clarity to feel exciting. Clarity is not exciting. Clarity is quiet. It removes options. It narrows focus. It reduces stimulation. At first, that feels like loss. Later, it feels like relief. But relief only comes if you stay long enough to experience it. This is where patience becomes functional. Not patience as virtue. Patience as strategy. You are allowing the system to settle. You are allowing your behavior to become predictable. Predictability builds trust. Trust builds momentum. Not emotional momentum. Behavioral momentum. And behavioral momentum is far more reliable. During these first 30 days, your only real responsibility is consistency. Not improvement. Not optimization. Not mastery. Consistency. If you show up and do the minimum required by the structure, the day is complete. There is no bonus for doing more. There is no penalty for doing less, as long as you stay. This removes the internal negotiation that drains energy. You are not asking yourself, do I feel like it? You are asking yourself, what is the structure today? Then you follow it. Even when it feels mechanical. Even when it feels uninspired. This is how discipline becomes neutral. And neutrality is powerful. The most important skill you are building in this phase is the ability to stay when nothing is pushing you. No crisis. No excitement. No external pressure. Just you and the structure. This is where most people disappear. Quietly. They don't quit dramatically. They just stop returning. They miss a day. Then another. Then they wait for motivation to come back. This system does not wait for motivation. It continues. And if you return the next day without self-punishment, the system accepts you. No guilt. No restarting. No drama. Staying does not mean perfection. It means refusal to abandon the process. The first 30 days are successful if one thing happens. You stop seeing consistency as an emotional achievement and start seeing it as normal behavior. That is all. No visible transformation required. No major breakthroughs. Just stabilization. If you can stay through this phase, the next one becomes possible. Because once stability exists, growth no longer feels threatening. When you are ready, we will move into the next layer. Not by adding pressure, but by addressing the resistance that remains underneath. That is where things begin to shift. Quietly. Chapter 8. Breaking Internal Resistance. Resistance is quieter than we think. It does not always arrive as panic or anxiety. Sometimes it is subtle. A lingering delay. A quiet negotiation with yourself. A rationalization that convinces you to postpone what you know you must do. This is what most people call procrastination. And it is not laziness. It is self-protection. Your mind has been trained to avoid discomfort. To seek the path of least resistance. To prioritize immediate safety over long-term growth. That mechanism has served you for years. It protected you from danger, from mistakes, from overextension. But now, in this 90-day system, that same mechanism feels like a barrier. It shows up as avoidance, distraction, or hesitation. It whispers that you are not ready. That the timing is wrong. That something else must come first. You have likely experienced it countless times. The moment you intend to act, a small internal voice emerges. Do it later. Just this once. Maybe tomorrow. This is where most people quit. Not because the work is impossible. Not because they cannot commit. But because they wait for emotional readiness, a feeling that rarely arrives on cue. Here is the quiet truth. You do not need to feel ready. Readiness is an illusion. It is a luxury that appears only after consistent action has begun. Movement does not wait for mood. Momentum does not wait for inspiration. The first step in breaking resistance is understanding it. See it for what it is, self-protection. Notice the patterns. Observe the hesitation without judgment. This is not a character flaw. It is a signal. Resistance is feedback, not failure. It indicates exactly where your system is being challenged. Where the old habits still hold sway. Where the mind is reluctant to release what feels familiar, even if familiar is limiting. When resistance shows up, respond deliberately. Do not negotiate endlessly. Do not try to reason it away with motivation. Do not wait to feel capable. Instead, act anyway. Even small action is enough. Even imperfect movement breaks the inertia. Even one repeated step, no matter how quiet, teaches your system that you will continue. This is where discomfort shifts meaning. Discomfort is not punishment. Discomfort is evidence. Evidence that the old patterns are losing control. Evidence that something new is emerging. Evidence that growth is occurring, even if it is invisible to the eye. You may feel tension in your chest. You may feel a subtle urge to retreat. You may find your thoughts wandering. All of this is normal. All of this is expected. All of this is part of the process. Do not fight the discomfort. Do not romanticize it. Do not attach moral value to it. Notice it. Name it. And continue. The principle here is simple. Movement precedes readiness. Your nervous system cannot wait to be ready. Your habits cannot wait for motivation. Your identity cannot wait for certainty. You act. The feeling of readiness follows. The practical application is quiet but structured. When you notice resistance, pause long enough to acknowledge it. Take a single deliberate action, one step toward the task, the habit, the change. It does not need to be perfect. It does not need to be complete. It only needs to exist. Then repeat. Every day. Consistency compounds quietly. Resistance diminishes slowly. Action becomes habit. Habit becomes identity. This is not dramatic. It is deliberate. You will encounter fatigue. You will encounter boredom. You will encounter doubt. All of these are signs the system is working. When the urge to avoid appears, note it. It is the mind protecting what it knows. It is the body resisting what feels unfamiliar. It is your nervous system saying, this is new. This is different. This is growth. And that is exactly what you want. Each time you act despite discomfort, you send a signal to yourself. I am capable of presence, even when I do not feel ready. I am capable of movement, even when hesitation is loud. I am capable of building trust with myself, one repeated step at a time. This is the hidden work of breaking resistance. It does not feel heroic. It does not feel visible. It does not announce itself with fanfare. It is quiet. It is patient. It is persistent. And over time, the effect is profound. You stop waiting. You stop negotiating. You stop needing to feel inspired. Instead, you act. Habitually. Calmly. Deliberately. That is how resistance loses its power. You are not becoming someone else overnight. You are not forcing change through sheer will. You are teaching yourself to trust yourself. To move regardless of emotion. To remain consistent when everything inside says otherwise. By the end of this chapter, you understand that discomfort is not a signal to quit. It is a signal to continue. Procrastination is not a moral failing. It is a message about where growth is happening. The practice is simple. Notice, acknowledge, act, repeat. Do this consistently over days, then weeks, then months. Let repetition become the teacher. Let trust in yourself grow quietly. Let movement become the norm, not the exception. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, resistance transforms. It becomes less threatening, less paralyzing, less convincing. You do not need to eliminate it. You need to move through it. One deliberate step at a time. By the time 90 days are complete, you will notice a subtle shift. You will notice that hesitation no longer dictates your choices. You will notice that action flows naturally, even without readiness. You will notice that the identity of someone who can remain present and consistent is becoming your default. This is quiet. It is deliberate. It is irreversible for anyone who practices it consistently. Resistance is not your enemy. Discomfort is not your punishment. They are markers along the path you have chosen. And now, you know how to walk through them. Chapter 9, The Middle Phase, Days 31 to 60. This is where most people quit. Not at the beginning, when everything feels fresh. Not at the end, when the results are obvious. In the middle. Days 31 to 60 are deceptively difficult. The novelty has worn off. The initial excitement, the small wins, the rush of I'm finally doing it, begins to fade. And suddenly, the work feels quiet. You might notice it first as boredom. You might notice it as impatience. You might notice it as a creeping sense that all of this effort is too slow, too small, or too unremarkable. This is normal. It is expected. It is a feature of the system, not a flaw in you. The problem here is not motivation. Motivation has never been your foundation. It was never meant to be. The problem is that consistency now asks something different of you. At the beginning, the work is exciting because it is new. You see the contrast to the old patterns. You feel the energy of change. But after 30 days, the system shifts. Now the work is less about novelty. Now it is about continuation. Now it is about repetition. Repetition is quiet. Repetition is subtle. It does not feel like progress in the moment. And that is exactly why it works. This is where most people fail. They mistake the lack of excitement for failure. They assume that if it does not feel significant every day, it is not working. It is working. Very quietly, invisibly. Every time you show up when it feels boring, when you feel tempted to skip, when you do not see immediate reward, you are reinforcing the system. You are embedding the habits into your identity. This is a crucial shift. The work is no longer external. It is internal. It is structural. It is the foundation of self-trust. To move through this phase, your approach must be deliberate. You cannot rely on feelings. You cannot rely on inspiration. You rely on what has been practiced, on the system you built, on the agreement you made with yourself. Keep your focus narrow. Do not expand your efforts beyond what you committed to initially. The temptation during this period is to add more, to push harder, to chase results. Resist it. More effort does not replace consistency. It dilutes it. It fractures attention. It steals energy. The strength of this phase comes from persistence within limits. From repeating what you agreed to do, day after day. From staying present, even when the work feels small. Notice how repetition builds momentum silently. Your nervous system starts to learn, quietly and gradually, that this is the default way of operating. You begin to anticipate action automatically. You no longer debate whether to start because the system itself begins to enforce movement. This is also where self-doubt surfaces. You may ask yourself, am I doing enough? Will this ever matter? Is this really working? These questions are normal. They are part of the middle phase. They do not indicate failure. They indicate that your mind is testing the strength of your commitment. Discomfort here is a signal, not a warning. It tells you that you are moving beyond your old thresholds. It tells you that the habits are beginning to compete with the patterns that once controlled you. Do not respond by seeking relief. Respond by continuing. Respond by observing the discomfort without judgment. Notice it. Accept it. Then return to the work. This phase also reinforces the importance of structure over motivation. Motivation is unreliable. Excitement is temporary. Structure and routine are permanent. Keep your focus on the simplest actionable step you committed to in the first 30 days. Do not complicate. Do not overthink. Do not chase shortcuts or hacks. Your progress in this phase is invisible. But invisibility is proof that it is real. Visible outcomes will come later. Right now, the work is internal. The secret of the middle phase is repetition. Not perfection. Not intensity. Repetition. Every day you repeat, you reinforce your identity. Every day you continue, you signal to yourself that you are reliable. Every day you stay when the work is quiet, you create strength from consistency. This is the point where many people begin to understand the difference between doing and becoming. They realize that the external results are secondary. What matters is the internal shift. The building of trust in yourself. By day 60, if you have stayed present, if you have repeated the small deliberate actions consistently, you will notice a subtle change. Not dramatic. Not flashy. But a quiet sense that you are more capable, more disciplined, more stable than you were 30 days ago. This is the power of the middle phase. It is the phase that separates those who quit from those who last. Those who chase instant reward from those who build enduring change. Those who remain reactive from those who become deliberate. Do not underestimate it. Do not dismiss the boredom, the doubt, the quiet resistance. These are signs of growth. These are evidence that you are embedding new behaviors into your identity. By the end of this chapter, remember, your job is not to feel inspired. Your job is to show up. Your job is to repeat. Your job is to remain steady when excitement fades. This is the moment where repetition becomes strength. Where small, deliberate actions compound. Where the internal systems you built begin to support the life you are practicing for. You are not failing because you feel ordinary. You are succeeding because you stay. And every day you stay, your future self grows stronger. By the close of day 60, you will be unrecognizable to the person who started 30 days ago, not in appearance, not yet in results, but in reliability, in self-trust, and in the quiet strength of practice. This is the essence of the middle phase. Show up. Repeat. Trust the process. The difference will become undeniable, eventually, quietly, and permanently. Chapter 10. Emotional Discipline and Self-Control. Most people believe that emotions are something to control, to suppress, or to overcome. They think that self-discipline means never feeling anger, frustration, or fear. This is not true. Emotional discipline is not the absence of feeling. It is the ability to feel, and yet choose your response. Your emotions are signals. They tell you something about your inner state, about your values, about what your nervous system is noticing. But they are not commands. They are not instructions. They are not orders you must obey. Too often, people confuse the intensity of a feeling with the correctness of an action. A spike of fear is not a sign you should retreat. A burst of anger is not a sign you should lash out. The intensity of emotion is irrelevant. It is what you do in response that matters. This is where most people fail. They act as if feeling strong emotion is permission to abandon intention. They respond reflexively, then later regret the choices made in the heat of the moment. And then they blame themselves for being weak or undisciplined. This is a lie. It is not weakness. It is habitual reaction. We are going to reframe that. Your emotions are natural. Your nervous system is doing exactly what it was designed to do. The problem is not the emotion itself, it is the response. You are learning to separate the two. You are learning to feel fully without being enslaved. The principle of this chapter is simple: act from observation, not impulse. You can think of this as building inner authority. Not through force, not through self-punishment, but through repeated choices. Each time you pause, each time you decide your response consciously, you reinforce your control. Over time, this becomes automatic. Emotional discipline is built quietly, without fanfare, through repetition, not inspiration. The practical system for this begins with a single step: awareness. Notice what you feel. Name it. Do not judge it. Do not try to analyze why it arose. Just observe. I notice tension in my chest. I notice irritation in my mind. I notice a sense of urgency to react. That is enough. Naming an emotion separates it from action. It creates the space necessary for choice. The next step is breathing. A calm, deliberate exhale. Nothing dramatic. No counting or technique needed. Just a moment to allow the nervous system to slow, even slightly. Even this small pause interrupts the automatic chain of reaction. It signals to your body and mind that not every impulse must be obeyed. Then comes the decision. What do I do next? This is not about choosing what feels good. This is about choosing what aligns with the person you are practicing being. The person who honors their 90-day agreement. The person who acts from consistency, not reflex. Sometimes the action will be small. Sometimes it will be simply remaining silent when words feel necessary. Sometimes it will be stepping back when your first instinct is to move forward. These are all acts of discipline. Resistance will appear. It always does. Your emotions will feel urgent. They will demand attention. Your mind will rationalize. It will say, you must react now. If you wait, you will fail. This is normal. It is information, not instruction. The urgency of your emotions is precisely why discipline matters. Growth is rarely comfortable. Struggle is rarely dramatic. It is quiet and persistent. The next layer of the system is reflection. After an emotional moment, take time, not immediately, to observe your choices. What did you do? What worked? What felt off? Do this without judgment. This is not evaluation for punishment. It is data collection. Your system grows stronger not through perfection, but through consistent observation and adjustment. You may notice that some emotions are particularly difficult. Anger, fear, sadness, shame. These are not to be avoided. They are to be practiced with. Approach them slowly. Let them arise. Notice their rhythm. Allow yourself to feel them, but do not allow them to dictate your actions. Discipline is not denial. It is alignment. You are learning to act according to intention while fully in contact with reality. Building inner authority also requires a boundary. You cannot negotiate with yourself endlessly. When strong emotion arises, your default should not be internal argument. I am too tired. I am too frustrated. I shouldn't do this. These conversations extend the emotional momentum. Instead, decide once. Align the decision with your identity. Then act. Habit compounding applies to emotional regulation as much as it does to tasks. Every time you make a deliberate choice, you reinforce the pattern of authority. Another aspect is language. How you speak internally shapes how your emotions operate. Replace the subtle commands to react with calm observation. Replace I have to with I choose to. Replace I cannot with I notice, and I proceed anyway. The shift is subtle but powerful. It reorients your nervous system from reactive survival mode to deliberate action mode. This is why repetition matters more than intensity. Each deliberate choice, no matter how small, compounds over time. Do not mistake the absence of drama for lack of progress. Most growth in emotional discipline occurs quietly, unnoticed even by the self initially. You may wake up one morning and realize that a situation that once would have triggered panic or anger now barely registers. That is the system working. That is the internal architecture being rebuilt. You are creating a nervous system that trusts itself to act with clarity, regardless of emotional turbulence. You will fail at times. You will respond impulsively. That is not the end. That is feedback. Notice it. Observe it. And return to practice. This is where the real shift occurs, in the quiet redirection after imperfection. Every return reinforces identity. Every moment of awareness strengthens authority. By the end of this chapter, you should see the task clearly. Emotional discipline is not a restriction. It is a practice. It is the difference between feeling at the mercy of your emotions and acting as the person you are becoming. It is not control for pride. It is control for alignment. Alignment with your 90-day system. Alignment with the identity you are solidifying. Alignment with a self that does not abandon itself in discomfort. Practice these steps consistently. Observe, pause, decide, act, reflect. Let the nervous system learn trust. Let repetition build authority. And allow the subtle shift to occur quietly. It will be undeniable, not because it shouts, but because it persists. You are not attempting perfection. You are attempting presence. Presence over impulse. Presence over chaos. Presence over old patterns. This is where inner authority is forged. This is where emotional discipline becomes default. This is where you stop being driven by intensity and start being guided by identity. By staying present through your emotions, you begin to respond instead of react. You create a foundation for all other disciplines to rest upon. Your days, your habits, and your choices will no longer be held hostage by transient feelings. Instead, they will be held steady by the quiet power of repeated deliberate action. And in that steadiness, you find freedom. Not the freedom of endless indulgence, but the freedom of mastery. Mastery over what is internal. Mastery over what is often hidden. Mastery that does not announce itself but quietly reshapes your life, day by day, moment by moment. Chapter 11. Changing how you speak to yourself. Most people never realize how often they are in conversation with themselves. Not just thinking, but negotiating, arguing, rationalizing, begging, persuading. It happens silently, inside the mind, every hour of the day. And yet, this internal dialogue shapes more of your life than any external event ever could. What you say to yourself matters. Not as words on a page, not as fleeting thoughts, but as internal authority. When your language is chaotic, when it is full of doubt, excuses, or hesitation, your behavior follows that instability. You might feel confident one moment, disciplined the next, and then exhausted or guilty the next. That inconsistency is rarely caused by the world. It is caused by the internal negotiation you are running constantly. Most people think inner dialogue is harmless. That it is just thinking. But it is not harmless. Every internal argument, every I should or I can't, is a vote against the self you are practicing to become. It reinforces the old patterns. It keeps you in cycles of procrastination, avoidance, and emotional reactivity. It is subtle, but it is powerful. This is where most change efforts fail. Not because people lack skill or effort. They fail because they are arguing with themselves. They promise action, then debate it. They affirm intentions, then contradict them immediately. They negotiate with fear, with comfort, with fatigue. And in that negotiation they lose. We are going to shift that. The principle here is simple. Speak to yourself as you would speak to someone you trust, or someone you are training, but never argue. Your words internally are tools, not critics. They are directions, not judgments. The first step is awareness. Notice the internal conversation without judgment. Listen carefully. Where are you negotiating unnecessarily? Where are you giving yourself permission to avoid effort? Where are you repeating phrases that undermine action? Simply hearing this is enough to start the process. You cannot correct what you do not recognize. Once awareness is established, begin to replace negotiation with clarity. I may feel tired, but I will do this anyway, is enough. I notice resistance. I will act anyway, works more than elaborate reasoning. Your inner language should be concise, calm, firm, free from argument. Every sentence should advance the person you are becoming rather than debate with the person you were yesterday. Next, eliminate the conditional mindset. Avoid statements like, I will do this if I feel ready, or I will act when I'm motivated. These phrases give your emotions veto power over your behavior. Emotional veto leads to drift. Drift leads to stagnation. Instead, anchor your inner dialogue in action. I choose to act. I choose to stay present. I choose repetition. The action is primary. Feeling is secondary. Resistance will appear. Your mind will object. It will attempt to rationalize. But I'm tired. But I don't feel like it. I'll do it later. This is natural. Do not view it as failure. View it as feedback. The moment you notice the rationalization, return to calm, firm language. Restate your commitment internally. Act. Repeat. Over time, this builds a consistent, unshakable internal authority. This practice also extends to the elimination of self-sabotage. Notice phrases like, I can't, I'm not good enough, I'll never manage this. These are not truth statements. They are habits of thought. Replace them with observation and commitment. I notice fear. I will proceed anyway. I notice doubt. I will proceed anyway. These sentences are simple, unarguable, and constructive. They do not require belief. They require repetition. The next step is specificity. Your inner dialogue should be directed. Instead of vague intentions, use precise commitments. I will write for 1 focused hour today, instead of, I will be productive. I will focus on clarity now, instead of, I need to organize my life. Specificity anchors the mind. It prevents the drift of abstract negotiation. It creates a functional inner language that produces visible action. Another essential aspect is neutrality. Speak to yourself with calm detachment, not judgment. Avoid praise or blame. You do not need to congratulate or scold. You only need to state facts internally and follow through. I notice resistance. I will proceed. I notice fatigue. I will proceed. This neutral approach removes emotional peaks and valleys that can destabilize consistency. Identity is reinforced through this dialogue. Each time you respond with clarity and firmness internally, you're telling yourself who you are becoming. I am someone who shows up even when it is difficult. I am someone who acts, regardless of emotion. You are not pretending. You are practicing. Identity emerges quietly, from repeated internal alignment, not from external validation or emotional highs. Expect setbacks. There will be moments when your internal language slips back into negotiation, doubt, or blame. This is normal. Observe it, acknowledge it, and return to calm, deliberate phrasing. Each return is stronger than the first, because it reinforces consistency over the alternative of arguing or quitting. This is where trust in self is built. Trust is not created in perfection. It is created in repeated return, in alignment over time. The final layer of this practice is endurance. Keep the inner dialogue active throughout the day. Not aggressively, not with mental effort, but consistently. Let it guide behavior before habit takes over. The more your internal language is precise, calm, and firm, the more automatic your actions become. You begin to act from identity rather than impulse. You begin to show up without debate. You begin to cultivate an internal authority that does not require external validation. By the end of this chapter, the listener should recognize the quiet but profound impact of inner language. The words you choose internally determine the habits you follow, the emotional reactions you allow, and the consistency you maintain. By speaking with calm authority, eliminating negotiation, and practicing alignment with your intentions, you are building a foundation that supports every other system in your 90-day reset. This is not dramatic. It is deliberate. It is quiet work. It is subtle, but cumulative. Over days, weeks, and months, this internal discipline will manifest in behavior that no longer wavers with emotion or distraction. You will notice a steadiness in your responses, a reduction in internal conflict, and an increasing ability to act from the self you are practicing to become. You do not need to feel ready. You do not need to feel motivated. You do not need to believe in the outcome. You need only to speak calmly, firmly, and deliberately to yourself, and act accordingly. Repetition is the teacher. Consistency is the builder. Identity emerges quietly in the gaps between thought and action, in the space where inner dialogue meets deliberate choice. This is where trust is established. This is where self-sabotage is neutralized. This is where the nervous system learns to follow intention rather than impulse. And this is where the quiet power of your 90-day system takes root, silently reshaping how you think, act, and show up each day. Chapter 12: Environmental Reset. Most people underestimate how much their surroundings shape their lives. Not just their physical space, but everything that touches them, the people they interact with, the media they consume, the habits they are exposed to. Change is rarely born in a vacuum. Your environment either reinforces who you are trying to become or it quietly pulls you back to who you were before. This is the hidden struggle most people never notice. They work on habits, mindset, or discipline, and yet after weeks or months, nothing changes. The reason is rarely internal failure. The reason is structural. Your environment is subtly resisting the change you are trying to create. Every old cue, every unexamined input, every habitual influence exerts pressure. Without adjusting it, you are swimming upstream every day, expending energy just to stay in place. This is not your fault. It is simply how human behavior works. We are designed to adapt to what surrounds us. Your nervous system is always taking cues from the environment, and it will default to the patterns it knows. That is why this chapter is critical. This is not about decorating a room or reorganizing a desk. This is about restructuring the system that guides your thoughts, emotions, and actions. The principle here is clear: change your environment, change your outcomes. The first step is observation. Take a quiet inventory of what surrounds you. What do you see when you wake up? What occupies your attention throughout the day? What voices do you hear? What rhythms fill your space? Notice media consumption, digital inputs, conversations, routines. Be thorough, but non-judgmental. This is data, not critique. You are mapping influence so you can control it. Next is subtraction. Remove what does not serve you. This is not about creating a perfect environment. It is about removing friction, distraction, and resistance. That might mean turning off certain notifications, unfollowing channels, or muting voices that keep you in doubt or complaint. It might mean distancing yourself from people who reinforce old patterns, silently, without drama, without confrontation. Each subtraction reduces noise and frees energy for the behavior you are trying to make habitual. Subtraction alone is not enough. There is also addition. But this addition is deliberate, constrained, and purposeful. Introduce inputs that reinforce the identity you are practicing. Books, podcasts, videos, or conversations that model calm discipline, reflection, and deliberate action. Spaces that support focus and reduce distraction. People whose presence encourages consistency rather than indulgence. Small, intentional adjustments that compound quietly over time. Your physical environment is part of this as well. Where you sleep, work, and move affects your nervous system and your daily choices. Spaces cluttered with distraction invite scattered thinking. Spaces simplified, organized, and intentional invite clarity and focus. You do not need perfection. You need function. You need subtle cues that reinforce your priorities without adding pressure. Resistance will appear. You may feel guilt for removing certain media, limiting social interactions, or saying no to habitual distractions. That is natural. This is where most people fail. They tolerate friction because of attachment or convenience, then wonder why their effort does not stick. Recognize the discomfort. Observe it. Proceed anyway. Discomfort here is evidence that old patterns are loosening their grip. Boundaries matter. They do not need to be dramatic, public, or rigid. They simply need to exist. Your environment is a container. It defines what behavior is easiest and what behavior is costly. If you want focus, clarity, and alignment, the container must support that. You are designing the container so that your nervous system defaults toward the person you are practicing to become, not the person you were yesterday. One subtle aspect often overlooked is temporal input. When you consume information, when you communicate, when you attend to others' demands, these are all environmental factors. You are shaping your mind minute by minute. Ask yourself, does this feed the person I am practicing to be? Or does it feed the person I used to be? Repeatedly choosing the former rewires your default responses. This is discipline without effort. This system also relies on limits. Constraints are not restrictions, they are liberating. Your attention, like energy, is finite. Each cue, each input, each influence is a claim on it. By removing unnecessary claims, you create bandwidth for deliberate action. By adding supportive cues, you create reinforcement. Over 90 days, these small adjustments compound quietly, stabilizing behavior in ways pure willpower never could. Notice patterns in the people around you. Some will unconsciously reinforce old habits. That is normal. It is not personal. Adjust proximity, interactions, or the frequency of engagement. You are not rejecting anyone. You are recalibrating influence. The goal is not isolation. It is alignment. Surround yourself with conditions that make consistency easier than inconsistency. That is the architecture of change. As this practice continues, subtle shifts emerge. You will notice mornings feel smoother, decisions feel easier, focus comes naturally, and resistance appears less daunting. You are creating a system where the environment does not compete with your intentions, but quietly supports them. And when everything aligns, the inputs, the space, the relationships, the internal effort required diminishes. Discipline is no longer a constant struggle. It becomes the default. Expect friction. Every adjustment may trigger doubt or discomfort. You may worry about what others think, or feel resistance to limiting inputs you are used to. These feelings are natural. They are part of the transition. Notice them, but do not negotiate endlessly. Return to the system. Keep the structure. Over time, this repetition rewires not just behavior but identity itself. By the end of this chapter, the listener should understand that external structure is inseparable from internal change. The body, mind, and environment are a system. One cannot be reliably upgraded without the others. By intentionally curating media, relationships, and physical space, you are not controlling the world. You are controlling the conditions under which your nervous system operates. And that control, quietly and deliberately, creates the outcomes you want. This is not dramatic. It is deliberate. It is structural. It is quiet, but cumulative. Change emerges when your environment no longer competes with your intentions, when friction is minimized, and when reinforcement is consistent. The 90-day system works because repetition becomes easier, resistance becomes visible and navigable, and your nervous system learns to default toward the person you are practicing to become. This is the environmental reset. It is foundational. Without it, other disciplines are fighting uphill. With it, every habit, every action, every choice aligns naturally. Steadiness grows. Trust in self deepens. Identity begins to stabilize. And the person you are practicing to become is supported at every level. Chapter 13, The Final 30 Days, Integration Phase. At this point in the 90-day system, the work is no longer new. The initial resistance has softened, the practices are familiar, and the structure has begun to settle into your life. Yet this phase, the final 30 days, is where most people falter. They assume that because the habits are established, the challenge is over. It is not. This is the period where effort transforms into embodiment, where repetition ceases to be conscious work and begins to feel natural. The hidden struggle most people face here is subtle. It is no longer about starting, it is about sustaining. The novelty has faded, and with it, the early sense of achievement. Your nervous system now tests you differently. It does not need to push back dramatically. It simply whispers, "Do you really need to continue? Isn't this enough?" This is where most people quit. Not because the habits are too difficult, but because the discipline feels ordinary. Ordinary feels unnecessary. Ordinary feels unworthy of attention. This is where we shift the language from effort to embodiment. Effort is visible. Effort requires constant attention and conscious energy. Embodiment is invisible. Embodiment is how you act when no one is watching, without needing to think or remind yourself. It is when habits move from being tasks to being a natural part of who you are. This is the quiet transformation, and it is the deepest kind of change. The principle here is simple: practice until it is indistinguishable from identity. This is not metaphor. It is procedural. You are reinforcing behaviors so consistently that the nervous system internalizes them. Decisions require less energy. Resistance appears less daunting. Automaticity grows. The person you are practicing to become is no longer aspirational. They are emergent. Begin with reflection. Observe how your days now operate. Notice which actions have become default. Notice which thoughts no longer trigger hesitation or internal debate. This is internal proof of change. You do not need validation from outside. You do not need a checklist or an external measure. The nervous system itself is the evidence. Peace, steadiness, focus, and clarity are now normal states rather than exceptions. Recognize them quietly. Let them register without judgment or celebration. At this stage, the practical application is subtle but powerful. Continue the systems you have built: morning routines, focused work, emotional discipline, inner dialogue, environmental alignment, but begin to let them operate without conscious effort. Do not add more. Do not complicate. The point is to allow repetition to take over, to let the actions reinforce the identity without additional friction. You are no longer practicing, they are becoming who you are. Resistance will still appear. Boredom, impatience, subtle self-doubt. This is not failure. It is a sign that integration is occurring. Your nervous system is reconciling the new identity with old habits, smoothing the transition. Do not react. Observe. Notice where friction remains. Apply the simplest response. Continue. Show up. Repeat. Consistency now serves as both proof and reinforcement. Internal proof also appears in your reactions. Moments that once would have triggered procrastination, frustration, or indecision now pass with minimal interference. You notice your mind processing differently, your emotions settling quicker, your body moving without conflict. These are the markers of embodiment. They are not dramatic. They are quiet. But they are unmistakable. The change is happening beneath awareness, shaping your default state, not just your behavior under scrutiny. Identity lock-in is key in these final days. This is where repetition cements into belief. The phrase, "I am someone who shows up, regardless of circumstance," becomes more than intention. It becomes a mental truth. Not a performance. Not a promise. Not an aspiration. A quietly held fact that shapes choices before deliberation is even necessary. Each repeated action reinforces this truth. Each conscious pause followed by alignment strengthens it. You are practicing trust in yourself at the deepest level. At this stage, avoid introducing novelty or experimentation that distracts from integration. The final 30 days are about reinforcing the architecture you have already built. It is about letting the nervous system internalize structure, discipline, and identity. Each day you move through routines without debate. Each day you respond calmly to resistance. Each day you align thought with action. You solidify change. You are no longer practicing. You are becoming. Expect subtle challenges. Old habits may appear briefly. Thoughts of doubt may intrude quietly. These are tests, not failures. They are necessary for the nervous system to reconcile the new with the old. Respond with quiet observation. Allow the practices to carry you. Allow identity to guide behavior. Do not negotiate. Do not argue. Continue. Presence now is more important than effort. Presence is the vehicle of embodiment. Chapter 14. Becoming unrecognizable, quietly. By now, the 90-day system has done its work quietly, beneath awareness, reshaping patterns, behaviors, and identity. Yet there is one final principle that most people overlook: real change does not need to announce itself. True transformation happens in private, in repetition, in the unseen moments when no one is watching. The world does not need to witness your growth for it to be real, and your voice does not need to narrate it. The hidden struggle most people face here is the urge to prove themselves. They feel compelled to explain, to showcase, to receive acknowledgement. I've changed, they want to declare. Look at me now. This is natural, but it is a trap. Announcing change too early invites pressure, expectation, and judgment. It shifts focus from the work itself to the perception of work. It transforms identity into performance. And performance, by its nature, is fragile. We are shifting from performance to embodiment. You do not need applause. You do not need validation. You do not need to narrate the process. The quiet power of transformation lies in letting results emerge naturally. Your life changes. Your habits, your presence, your calm authority, all shift quietly. Others notice, eventually, but that is a side effect, not the goal. The principle here is simple: let change operate privately. Let results speak without explanation. The more you resist the urge to announce, the more grounded and unshakable the transformation becomes. The more you demand recognition, the more fragile the identity remains. True authority is invisible, internal, and consistent. It does not need witnesses. The practical application is subtle. First, maintain privacy. Continue the practices you have established: morning routines, focused work, emotional discipline, internal dialogue, environmental alignment, without seeking external acknowledgement. Do not tell people about the internal victories, the self-discipline, or the struggles you have overcome. Allow the nervous system to integrate these wins without adding social pressure. Second, observe the quiet evidence of change. Your responses are calmer. Your focus is sharper. Your habits require less effort. Your internal dialogue is firm and consistent. These are proof. Internal proof matters more than external applause. It is the signal your identity is solidifying. When your behavior no longer relies on validation, you are becoming unrecognizable in the most powerful way, internally transformed. Resistance will appear. You may feel impatience, the urge to showcase progress or seek praise. This is normal. Observe it. Acknowledge it. Return to quiet practice. Do not let the social reward system hijack the internal one you have spent 90 days building. The pull to perform is subtle, yet it is relentless. This is where most people undermine the stability of their growth, revealing themselves too soon and weakening the internal authority they have cultivated. Another key layer is humility in the midst of transformation. Growth that announces itself is often fragile. Growth that is quiet is resilient. It does not need reinforcement from the outside. It does not require comparison or acknowledgement. By maintaining privacy, you allow identity to solidify without interference. You also protect the nervous system from unnecessary feedback loops that can destabilize consistency. This phase also requires detachment from outcome. Results will show, naturally. The people around you will notice, circumstances will shift, and life will reflect the new patterns you have built. But your focus is not on their recognition. It is on your alignment, your consistency, your embodiment. External signs are incidental, internal proof is primary. When your attention remains on the internal, transformation continues effortlessly. Internal proof may be quiet, but it is undeniable. You may notice subtle changes. Conversations are calmer, tasks are approached with less friction, emotional resistance is lower, focus comes naturally. You no longer negotiate endlessly with yourself. You respond deliberately. Your presence is steadier. These markers are more significant than any external acknowledgement, because they reflect a nervous system rewired, not a performance rehearsed. Expect subtle comparison, even silently. You may notice others who appear unchanged or notice the urge to justify your progress to someone who does not recognize it. This is normal. Do not act on it. Comparison distracts from integration. Keep the focus on your own alignment. The person you are becoming does not need to measure itself against others. Its progress is defined by internal consistency, not by applause or acknowledgement. Identity lock-in in this stage is reinforced through repetition. Every moment of quiet practice, every time you resist the urge to announce, strengthens the internal structure you have built. Each repetition tells your nervous system, this is how I operate. I do not rely on validation. I do not need recognition. I follow the practices because they are true to the self I am becoming. This is the final layer of trust, of self-authority, and of unshakable consistency. By the end of this phase, the transformation is complete, not in spectacle, not in external recognition, but in quiet, undeniable embodiment. You are unrecognizable not because you have changed superficially, but because your internal architecture has shifted. Your habits, your focus, your emotional discipline, your inner dialogue, and your environmental alignment now operate as default, integrated aspects of your identity. This is the essence of quiet power. It is invisible, but it is consistent. It does not demand acknowledgement, and it does not depend on hype. It is resilient because it is built internally. It will persist because it is no longer effortful. You do not announce it. You do not defend it. You live it, moment by moment, day by day. And that is why it is unshakable. The final truth of this chapter is simple. Those who show too soon often reveal weakness. Those who integrate quietly, who allow the nervous system to solidify change without commentary, achieve resilience. They do not need explanation. Their actions, calm presence, and habits communicate it all. Others will notice naturally. The world cannot compel this transformation. It cannot replicate it. It can only witness it. This is what it means to become unrecognizable quietly. Not dramatic. Not public. Not hyped. Just persistent. Just integrated. Just present. Chapter 15, Life After 90 Days. The 90 days are over. The structure, the repetition, the discipline, the quiet practices, they have carried you to a place that, at the beginning, may have felt unreachable. And yet, this is not the end. It is a beginning. Not of effort, not of striving, but of integration. You are entering a new phase, life after 90 days. The hidden challenge here is subtle. Many assume that once the 90 days are complete, change is permanent without ongoing attention. Others assume that they must now maintain everything with force, as if the practices themselves were the end rather than the means. Both assumptions are misleading. Change is neither automatic nor fragile. It is a system. It is a set of habits, structures, and internalized practices that now need to become your baseline, not your exception. The principle is simple. Turn the structure into lifestyle, without forcing intensity, without relying on motivation. You are no longer practicing the habits of a different person. You have become the person who practices them. Now the task is to allow this integration to persist naturally, without creating pressure that leads to burnout. The first step is observation. Notice what has changed within you. Observe where resistance has softened, where emotional discipline feels familiar, where daily routines operate with less friction. These are signals of internal proof. This is your nervous system confirming that repetition has created identity. Trust these signals. Let them inform your next steps, rather than doubting yourself or imposing external validation. Next, simplify. Do not add more than is necessary. Life after 90 days is not about complexity. It is about refinement. Keep the practices that have worked. Remove those that feel forced or unnecessary. Structure your days in a way that naturally reinforces the person you have become. Less is more. Consistency matters more than volume. A few deliberate practices, repeated daily, will carry more weight than a long list of sporadic efforts. Expect friction. Old habits, old environments, and old relationships may attempt to reassert influence. This is normal. Do not assume that the work is complete simply because the calendar has passed 90 days. Change is embedded in your nervous system, but it still operates within the larger system of your life. Observe triggers, notice patterns, and quietly maintain the practices that sustain alignment. Persistence is now your tool, not intensity. Another critical aspect is pacing. Avoid overcompensation. Do not attempt to double your efforts to lock in the change. Overextension invites fatigue, resentment, and subtle relapse. Instead, focus on maintaining presence. Align your energy with your intentions. Keep your habits consistent but manageable. Let life after 90 days feel like natural extension, not a relentless challenge. Integration also involves reflection. Regularly check in with yourself. Notice where alignment feels strong and where friction appears. Adjust, subtly, without judgment. Reflection is not analysis for performance. It is awareness for alignment. It reinforces trust in yourself. It reminds the nervous system that you are consistent not out of pressure, but out of habit, identity, and deliberate choice. Language continues to matter. Speak internally with calm, firm authority. Remind yourself not of what you must do, but of who you are becoming. I am someone who shows up consistently. I am someone who acts deliberately. I am someone who maintains alignment with intention. These phrases are quiet anchors. They reinforce identity without drama, without hype, without internal negotiation. You may notice external recognition. Others may see the change and comment. This is incidental. It is not the goal. Life after 90 days is about internal authority, not external applause. Allow results to speak for themselves. Continue without explanation. The quieter the internal process, the more resilient the outcome. This is the difference between performance and embodiment. Trust is essential. Trust the person you have become. Trust that habits, once practiced with repetition and integration, now operate as default behaviors. Trust that emotional discipline, internal dialogue, and environmental alignment continue to reinforce identity. You do not need constant monitoring. You do not need excessive review. Trust is built through practice, consistency, and quiet observation, not through pressure or doubt. Expect subtle challenges. There will be days of fatigue, distraction, or doubt. These are not failures. They are reminders that life is dynamic, and even identity requires gentle maintenance. Do not negotiate endlessly with yourself. Do not panic. Observe. Adjust lightly. Return to your practices calmly. Let consistency, not intensity, guide action. At this stage, integration becomes natural. Habits that once required conscious effort now operate as defaults. Emotional regulation is automatic rather than forced. Internal dialogue flows calmly and firmly. Focus, productivity, and presence feel less like work and more like natural expression. This is embodiment, sustained beyond the 90-day window. Finally, life after 90 days is about continuity, not completion. You are not finished. You are evolving. The system you built is now your framework for ongoing growth. Each day, each choice, each action reinforces the identity you practiced into being. The 90 days were a reset, a concentrated period of alignment. What follows is the extension of that system into a lifelong practice. The final truth is simple: you are no longer the person who negotiates endlessly with yourself. You are no longer driven solely by motivation, inspiration, or external cues. You are someone who acts deliberately, consistently, and quietly, regardless of circumstance. You are someone who trusts the internal system that 90 days established. This person is resilient, disciplined, and aligned. This person endures. Do not rush. Do not dramatize. Do not seek recognition. Continue in quiet consistency. Let the embodiment of your habits, identity, and alignment guide your life. Trust in the internal proof you have cultivated. Life after 90 days is not about intensity, it is about presence. Not about performance, it is about identity. Not about external acknowledgement, it is about internal authority. This is where change becomes permanent. Not because it is celebrated, not because it is announced, but because it is lived, moment by moment, without negotiation. Trust yourself. Maintain structure. Preserve calm. And quietly, deliberately, the person you have become will continue to shape every aspect of your life, long after the 90 days are behind you. You have reached the end of this 90-day journey. What you have done is not about speed, drama, or external recognition. It is about quiet, deliberate change. Over the past weeks, you have practiced consistency, presence, and alignment. You have cultivated habits, adjusted your environment, refined your inner dialogue, and strengthened your emotional discipline. This is where real transformation lives, not in words, not in announcements, not in moments of inspiration, but in repetition, integration, and embodiment. What you have built now belongs to you. It is internal, resilient, and private. It will continue to shape your days, your choices, and the person you are becoming. Carry this forward without pressure. Let the system work through you, moment by moment, day by day. Trust yourself. Trust the processes you have established. The changes you have made are now part of your internal architecture. They will persist, quietly, steadily, without the need for validation or explanation. This audiobook is not an ending. It is a foundation. Return to it when you need grounding, when habits falter, or when clarity is required. Let it serve as a quiet reminder that transformation is deliberate, subtle, and cumulative. Your 90 days may be over, but the life you are building continues. You are ready to live it.